now. There's a step that I didn't take. Thank you. All right, so it's with great celebration and that we have that Paul is actually even able to join us for Adult Ed this morning. And I think we would all agree, there's no disagreement at this point in time, that music is a soul to the universe. It gives wings to the mind, flight to the imagination, and life to everything. This is Plato. It's a mediator between the spiritual and the sensual life. The highest goal of music is to connect one's soul to their divine nature, not entertainment. And with that, David, if you might have a word of prayer, and then I'll introduce Paul.
Perfect. Let's pray. Loving God, we thank you for the gift of music that reflects a way to experience your love and Christ's divinity in the deeper part of ourselves, which is transcendent. And so for the gift of heart and mind and soul and spirit that is represented by our adult education group here in the lounge and those represented across the country on our live stream, we give you thanks for the gift that Paul is and this journey of this year and this time together this next hour. Bless us in your holy name. Amen.
Amen. Well, it is my great pleasure to introduce Paul, who is wears a lot of different hats. He's a church musician, a consultant, a teacher, and a composer who finds his greatest joy in the collaboration and community-centered ministry. He's committed to modeling expansive, imaginative, and hospitable experiences of music making wherever he goes. His leadership builds trust, it invites spaces of creativity, vulnerability, and play, and it supports practices of reflection and holistic learning. He's recognized nationally as a musician and a liturgist. He's been helping and continues to help strengthen, energize, and liberate faith communities through the ways they worship and sing together. He discerned a call to interim ministry after 20 full years as a full-time church musician in St. Louis and in New York City. And over the past decade, he's offered transitional leadership, consulting services, and creative resources to congregations in seasons of discernment, challenge, and transformation. This includes coaching clergy, musicians, and musician search teams. Additionally, he's been a guest lecturer and worship leader at seminaries and colleges around the U.S., including Baylor University, the Candler School of Theology, Lutheran School of Theology in Chicago, Princeton Theological Seminary, St. John's College, Union Theological Seminary in New York City, in New York, Vanderbilt Divinity School, the Yale Institute of Sacred Music. And as we are beginning to look at our future together as a church, it's with great pleasure and that we welcome you, Paul.
Thank you. I'm really grateful. I wonder if you might just briefly join me. We shall come together singing. Just try that with me. We shall come together singing. Then the second part of that is, we shall come together now. We shall come together now. I'll ask two questions, and this is really the heart of my ministry and the heart of the way I think about the work that I do. How shall we come together? We shall come together singing. When shall we come together? We shall come together now. You know your part. You'll respond to my question. How shall we come together? We shall come together singing. When shall we come together? We shall come together now. Folks on Zoom can sing. You're on mute. We can't hear you. Don't worry. How shall we tell our stories We shall tell our stories singing. When shall we tell our stories? We shall tell our stories now. How shall we teach our children? We shall teach our children singing. When shall we teach our children? We shall teach our children now. I think this one feels a little bit maybe bigger than anything, bigger than all of us, but it is how shall we learn to love? We shall learn to love singing. When shall we learn to love? We shall learn to love now. That's a little song by Maggie Wheeler, a song leader in the Bay Area. And I love it just simply because it's a question and an answer, and it is an invitation to imagine what happens when we sing together. That the gift of the ministry that I feel called to do, this interim ministry, is not just simply providing goods or services to a congregation. It is not simply showing up to tell you what to do or how to do it in that way that sometimes consultants or specialists in particular areas can, but is to make, with the most generous and loving invitation I can, make it clear to you that singing, our voices, our collective energy together, are really the heart of church. They're really the heart of a lived, proclaimed, embodied faith. And so for me, practices of singing together, and that can take so many different forms, can't it? Think about the different ways in which singing is woven through life of a community. That my hope and prayer during the season of interim is that we are deepening into a sense of our faith through song, that we're deepening into a sense of our individual and communal capacity to be musical and do musical things together, that also we maybe grow and become stronger and more courageous and are willing to even try some new things now and again. That singing, in my experience and the formation that I've had in my life and faith, has been critical to helping me grow as a person. So that's the reason I feel deeply called into church music in the first place. As you said, I've spent 20 years very gratefully serving in full-time capacities in different congregations around the United States. And that work was life-giving. I had, I will say, also extraordinary mentors and teachers during that time who were not just sort of encouraging me towards sustaining what I knew, but who were very, very challenging and even at times reoriented my perspective towards song and towards church music. Alice Parker is one that I'd like to name aloud. She died 2 years ago. But one of the great American composers and arrangers. She worked with Robert Shaw for many, many years at the heart of her career, but then went off to do her own thing in the church music world, where she began to lead communities in hymn sings and in community singing spaces. And rather than sit there and play a piano or play an organ, she would simply use her voice to gather people in song and to help enliven and refresh their sense of what their tradition was. So she would lead, Lutherans, she'd lead Mennonites, she'd lead Presbyterians and the whole lot, but she would do it from a stance that it's not just the music that matters, but the text. What we sing and how we sing matter so very deeply. And so she had this way of evoking awareness and evoking a sense of presence. And I have to say that she, of many of the people that I've worked with, is probably the most formative for me, in that when I step in front of a congregation or I step in front of a choir, and when I think about the work of interim ministry, I hope that what I'm doing in your midst is evoking awareness. oh, we've never heard that hymn sung exactly that way or at that tempo. Well, I'm noticing something different is happening in the community. And so I hope that over this next year, again, my work is to sustain what has already been a very lively music ministry here at Bradley Hills. That is to take nothing away from the rich work that people like Matthew and Donald Sutherland and Kyle and others have done over many decades here, but is to, I hope, during a season where things are a little in betweens, to invite awareness, evoke awareness, and to invite us perhaps to some new experiences as a community that deepen your faith, that deepen your awareness of what your role is as a worshiper, as a participant. If you're a choir member, maybe I hope you'll also come away from the experience of working together in this choir or in a choir as a part of a bigger community of singers. So many musicians, in my estimation, and this is a little bit of a theological and a musical perhaps difference that I might carry from some of my colleagues. I think that the principal choir of the church is the congregation. And that for me, my fundamental calling and work is in this interim time is to treat you, congregation, and congregation members, you are the choir, truly, of the church. And so I hope that you'll notice an investment in the ways that we sing congregationally and helping to draw attention to perhaps both familiar and new hymnody. I hope you'll be aware of your own voice in a new way. And for the choir, that very gratefully shows up every Thursday or every couple of weeks for a community choir or for our younger singers, that they are, yes, affirmed and called forth, given space to grow, right, and to achieve beautiful things musically. They can pray on our behalf because they practiced, right? But they are still a part of the congregation. They may physically be apart from you physically, right? They sing in a loft, but they are still your leaders and they are still a part of this body of singing. And so that I think that might be one way you might notice perhaps the leadership that I offer being maybe somewhat different from others, or maybe the same. I again don't have the perspective of that you may have from being here for many years. But I think also the last thing I'll say before I want to invite a question from you is I hope that we'll also have some surprise moments. I don't know about you, but when you come to church every week, there is this moment where I think we know the way the liturgy goes, don't we? We have a pretty strong sense of where the beginning, the middle, and the end of worship are. But have you ever had a moment where you were like driving somewhere and you knew where you were headed, but you were interrupted by a beautiful bird that you saw, or hopefully not driving, or where you were on a walk in your neighborhood and you were walking through some familiar space, but something else caught your attention, something else maybe say gently disrupted or caught your eye. I wonder how that can happen in worship too. Can we change things in ways that don't cause us to worry that everything is going to change, right? There's only so much change human groups can manage at one time. You lost a beloved musician back in May, and so there's grief here, right? There's loss. Some people are very, very bereft that you've lost a musician who carried the musical tradition of this congregation so beautifully. And so I don't want to disrupt or take away from the grief of that, but I also want to say that this is also a really neat moment to try some things and perhaps to see where surprise and delight might show up in our life together as a community. And music, in my estimation, is one of the things that is best at that. We can hear different colors, different timbres, different modes of accompaniment. Well, we've always heard this played on the piano. Well, what happens when we play it on the organ? What happens when the bells do something to draw our attention? I can't wait for a few weeks from now when our bell choir is back. I've got a wonderful thought about how they'll introduce a hymn. My mind and my imagination are always sort of thinking, not just how can I do something new for novelty's sake, but how can I do something new that helps evoke awareness and a sense of delight, joy, and the holiness, the goodness, the beauty of God's presence in our midst collectively. Those are just framing a bigger picture. Those are things I really care about. And those are things that I hope and pray we will experience, or that maybe, I don't know, have we already experienced in worship over the last now? I dare say I've only been with you for 5 Sundays so far. And it feels like I've been with you longer. And that's a good feeling, by the way. That's a grateful feeling. The wondering I have actually, and I do wonder if I might ask the group a question, is what are you or what have you been noticing in worship? We asked this at the Worship and Arts Committee meeting last week. And when I ask that question, I mean that by way of, what are you experiencing? What are you feeling? What are you hearing? What is your sensing self aware of in our worship life together in these past weeks, in the early times that we've been together? And there are no right or wrong answers. We're speaking out of our personal experience, but what have you been noticing? Just to maybe draw you into the
At
question.
home in the chat, we'll recognize you as well.
Yes, please.
I would say I notice a different pace of doxology, and sometimes I feel like, oh, I have to catch up. And also just more instruments, more use of instruments, and both are welcome. One is a little more jolting than the other, or you know, I'm adjusting.
Yes.
But
Yes.
and I remember it from my youth going faster in the doxology, so it's not like
Yes.
it's totally strange, but it's just interesting.
Yes, so noticing some different pacing and noticing some different instruments. Thank you, Kathy. Others, what are you noticing?
The voicing and, I think the invitation.
If you could speak up so that people.
Voicing and the invitation to children to, enjoy it, playfully. That, without the anxieties there. I kind of noticed that.
A playful invitation to children
Right.
to engage in music making. What else?
I know once, and I can't remember the name of it, but one of the hymns that are presentations that you sang was one of my favorites that I hadn't heard for a long time. And I carried it with me all week long. I couldn't get it out. It was wonderful. So I did notice that.
So noticing the way that music can live with us beyond just that one moment on Sunday, but we carry tunes or melody or words with us.
Yes. Now we've got some comment in the chat. Let me see. One comment, I wondered how the choir would do without Matthew. And the comment is they are, if anything, even better, and their enthusiasm is exciting. And then Cliff, that was Alvin, Cliff commented greater depth and range from the organ music itself, a fullness in body and spirit from the choir loft.
Thank you for those noticings. Others.
I thought last Sunday was a beautiful example of bringing in a variety of music and voices and you know, into the service. Of course, very suitable, given it was World Communion Sunday, and I like the drums.
Noticing the addition of a different instrument. I think someone said in the choir, maybe this past week, they said they'd not heard a djembe in the sanctuary before. That was a new sound. And I want to name also, friends, that noticing can also include the real discomfort and dis-ease of, I don't know how I feel about that yet, or that could be uncomfortable or cause discomfort for me. That is, I want to name that, friends. Your being willing to voice that is as important as being willing to name what you love and what you appreciate. That sometimes discomfort is actually a really powerful teacher alongside our more positive noticings. And I think I will say I love cheerleaders. You know, I mean, positive feedback is always welcome. And as a church leader, of course, I think we hope that there will be more positive than negative feedback. But I also want to say that if there are things we notice that are challenging or are difficult, those are equally important to the discernment work that you're doing as a congregation. especially for your search committee,
Mm.
around what are the qualities of leadership and the skill set that this congregation really needs for its future. I think you can all be very helpful, I say informants may not be the right word, but feedback givers to members of the search committee in that regard.
Conversation partners.
Conversation part, that's a great way to say it. I love it.
I
What else are you noticing?
say that, so it was before you came on in September, which would be this 5 weeks that you're talking about. I think it was the first, one of the first times in the summer. You came 2 times in the summer. And I think it was the first time I was actually told, so as a worship leader in a sense, I was told that the curé or following the prayer of adoration and confession and adoration would be a little bit different, but that's all I was told, was that, it's gonna be a little bit different. And so, standing at the pulpit and just, waiting for the difference, and I tell you, because I can still feel it now, that when I heard the bells and then the singing, so it was the ringing of the bells during the curé or prior to, and it just took me just to this deep, very contemplative, meditative place, sort of like Tazay, that was just so, it was just beautiful, and so Thurman talks about glad surprises. So that was just a really glad surprise that I felt like really right here in my soul. And it's important because our prayer of adoration and confession can oftentimes just seem so ritualistic. We're just reading the words, going through the movement, but those bells and how we did the curé just made it so sacred to me that day. It was just beautiful.
So noticing a sense of sacredness and of prayerfulness, I really want to say this, and I think this is something I have been grateful to learn from my Jewish cantor colleagues and folks who are leaders of prayer. There's a beautiful, beautiful essay by Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, the great thinker of the 20th century, worked alongside Martin Luther King Jr., of course, in the civil rights movement. But Heschel says a lot about prayer. And he talks about the music leader in the Jewish tradition as he calls it the leader of prayer, the master of prayer. I don't like the word master so much. I'll take the word leader. But that in some ways, the role of a musician in a space like a church or sacred space is to, hopefully, I pray through my leadership, to help deepen prayer. And as St. Augustine said, when you sing, you pray twice. You get the benefit, not just of the blessing of the words, but of affect, of mood, of a minor key, of the tone of a bell, a timbre. When I talk about surprises and delight, sometimes I think we actually, our imaginations are a little too impoverished. If we worship a God who is so beyond knowing and vast, well, our musical repertoire sometimes really gets quite narrow. But what does it look like to begin to open out and open up? We will not, of course, friends, be able to do everything, nor should we. We need to be authentic and faithful to who we are in our culture and in our context. And that's, I think, part of the work of my interim with you as well, is to ask you some questions about who you are and who you want to be and what feels authentic and what doesn't, and maybe model some experiences. But I also think that maybe, I pray, we can understand that prayer can take so many different forms. And sung prayer in particular can take many forms. Look at our denominational diversity, friends, from the Orthodox, who chant everything, to our Quaker friends who nary sing or talk in a worship service. Within that broad spectrum of between silence and constant sound, I think is God, is the holiness of prayer and of ways of encountering God through sound. So
Yeah,
start
I
our
know
imaginations.
my grandchildren in the Bay Area belong to a progressive Jewish congregation. And when you go to those services, everybody sings, and the entire service basically is sung back and forth. And it is a different experience, but I really like it. It's accessible. Pat Stalker also wanted to comment that she likes the sense of fun and enthusiasm that you brought to our worship.
Thank you.
wanted to.
I have to say that the word play gets a bad rap. What do musicians do with their instrument? They play it. That there is, if you look at like music from the early Renaissance and look at this form, you'll see it sometimes the word toccata, or which comes from the Latin is toccare, which literally means to touch the keys. And there's just such an incredible sense we get that music is something that is sensuous, it's experienced, and it is, if you look at very early musical forms in particular, there was a huge amount of improvisation going on. Even Bach. If you look at the figured bass of the Baroque and you look at, the bass line, if you're a musician and you've seen all those little numbers that are down below, it is the equivalent of a jazz chart, and the player voices the chords based on the context and their ear. There is no one set way to do it. And so I really think that we need to, not need to, I wonder what it would look like to cultivate the imagination that it could not just be one way, but it could be many ways. And our forebears in music making today are James O'Donnell, excuse me, is going to play an extraordinary piece at the end of his program based on the name of one of his teachers, Jean Hélin. And in the French organ tradition, anyone ever been to Notre Dame or one of the great cathedrals in Paris? Friends, those organists are often improvising massive parts of the mass. They're playing based on plain chant melodies. It's a very different ethos when music is something that is created, maybe even in the moment. That is scary. That is a little bit like walking. It is a little bit like walking a tightrope. And it also, I think, creates a different energy of possibility that it can be different or it can vary from week to week. And so part of our as a musician, the sacred tending I have to do is to pay attention to how does this community need to hear this piece of music this week? What is the right instrument? What is the right tone? What's the right tempo? I really mean that. In Black church traditions, they have a really unique quality of, if you've ever been to New Orleans and you've been to a New Orleans funeral, there is a way that those songs can be both joyful and played at a fast tempo, right? And they become part of Mardi Gras, they become part of third line, second line, they become part of a celebration. But then when they show up at a funeral, what happens? Tempos may slow and they become more soulful and doleful even. Can our hymns do that? Just wondering.
Well, I just have a comment
Yeah.
about Todd's funeral and the toccata at the end. That this whole week, it's been in my head. I think of Todd, I think of you, and during a sad moment, it was just a wonderful choice to send off for all of us. And your playing was phenomenal, Chris, and yeah, really powerful.
Thank
I
you.
mean,
As a person who's here as your, if I could even say it this way, as your musical pastor, and I do see the work as really much, it is a musical role and it is also a pastoral role. The gift of that moment is that I could take in all of the learning of who Todd was. I did not ever get a chance to meet him personally, and then in a beautiful way, I'm grateful for all I learned and all the choir shared of memory, and then put it into my fingers and hopefully, send it out as blessing and as gift. And I think that that's also a part of this ministry, is I would love for us to have a sense that music is something that we share. Music isn't something that I perform for you. It's not something I give to you as a gift. So that is actually a nice gesture. I wonder what changes between thinking about it as a gift versus as something we share, as a shared experience. And may I say this, a shared human experience, because human beings are made for music. We're wired neurologically. We're made to make music. Whether we know it or not, you have, as Thomas Traeger says, you have a rhythm instrument if you feel your pulse, and you also are a wind instrument. You have a voice. Air passes through your vocal cords and makes sound. So friends, you are an instrument yourself. And if you want to, you can use those in much more coordinated ways. I say that because I think that oftentimes we have divisions in church between who is a musician and who is not, or who is more or less musical and who is not. And I start with the basic premise that we're all made for this. We all can participate in it in varied ways. The key is practice. Practice. And church is one of the great places we get to show up to practice together, like a big choir.
With your leadership, you give us some confidence as a visual artist who I feel like I have very little talent in the musical area, although I love it. It really does help to have something that makes me feel more comfortable. And maybe I shouldn't even raise this, but I think many of us have been bewildered by how someone like Taylor Swift can have thousands, hundreds of thousands of people. Well, I was able to go to a Taylor Swift concert, and I found out that it's because everybody participates. It's not a performance, even though she is a performer. Everybody at that concert is part of the audience, is part of the performance. I had no idea. I was shocked. And it really gave me a whole new look at what music can do and what telling stories can do, and not to demean our church experiences. I love going to Montreat to conferences, because usually in those settings we are more part of the whole experience. Hun?
It looks like there is a Swiftie in the room. But
Well, I wasn't before. I mean, that my daughters had to drag me in to the whole.
That's true.
maybe for adult ed, we can invite her over.
She gets lots of folks to go along with her, but go ahead.
But yeah, so I think my worship professor would always say, worship it's called worship because the audience isn't the congregation, the audience is God. So whether it be you're joining from the choir, or you're playing the organ, or you are sitting at the pews, you're not watching each other. It's God watching all of us doing this ritual stuff every week. So I think that mindset sort of shifts, and at least personally for me, when I play the music, I try to be anonymous a little bit, because if I do my music right, then it's not about me. It's not about the musician. It's about, why we're here, which is God. The other thing is, of course, I am still waiting for your glory to God, whose goodness shines on me, to make an appearance here, because I don't know if y'all know, but he wrote Gloria Patri in the newer Presbyterian hymnal that even my seminary uses every time we have chapel. We always use that version. Not the old, glory be to, not that one, but his version. So hopefully it's gonna make an appearance soon. I guess lastly, with regards to like the World Communion Sunday and different kind of music, I think how can we sort of do that in a way that is faithful and that we don't fall into tokenism, seeing, like, oh, we sing this African whatever because it's the World Communion Sunday. And as soon as the Sunday ends, we put it back in the cupboard or whatever, and it's like, okay, well, see you next year. So yeah, that's the question, I guess.
Well, I thank you. That's really interesting, that the idea of musical, an authentic musical diversity within our church's life means that we are often asking questions that I think are important questions: is who is represented, who is not represented, how do we authentically and faithfully reflect the gifts. It felt very important to me last week, and I'm just speaking now of my own, this is my own inner dialogue here. So about the middle of the week, as we were looking at finalizing the bulletin, I thought, we have some representation in this community. I've been just delighted to meet so many people from different parts of the world, different life stories and experiences. But Jong Kim, who came to join the choir just this past year, he started with us in September. I'm so grateful. He comes from a very strong Korean Presbyterian background, sang in choirs for many, many years, and is now in a place where he has the time to commit to singing here. And I noticed that we also had a guest clergy person last week who was also Korean. And did you notice who sang or who spoke the words of institution in Korean last week? And it was such a beautiful Holy Spirit moment when then he sang a newer Korean hymn, but in Korean for part of our communion reflection. And you do not want me to sing in Korean. I would not have blessed you with my Korean so much as someone who has the voice and the lived and cultural experience. And this is part of the care that I want us to show is that, and I don't want that to be just once a year. I told him that I have other pieces of music that come from the Korean church and from Korean folk spaces and and I'd love to be in dialogue with him. So my work is not, again, just to work with who I see in front of me at the moment, but is to also be asking who else needs to be centered? Who else's voices need to be heard? This is a very subtle thing, friends, but we sang in Spanish and we sang in English in a bilingual setting last week for communion, and I hope you noticed that. Why does it matter that we sing in Spanish in an English dominant space? What happens when we disrupt the dominance of one linguistic tradition with other languages to, may I say, wonder what is it like for a Spanish speaker to come to an English space? What would it be like for us as English speakers to go to a Spanish speaking space? Have we experienced the disruption of our own privilege? And this is a small way we do it. We're not going to sing a whole service in Spanish, but friends, there is a disruption and a discomfort that can come in approaching that which we do not yet know. But there also can be an amazing gift and blessing in engaging it and in the process of learning with and from another. And so I hope that part of what we're doing in this time, Han, is also inviting people to learn with and from each other. Yes, in this community, because there's a really beautiful diversity here, but I also want to name that we live in a very rich, culturally rich and diverse metro area in which we have, people from different languages and traditions and cultures who can come to resource us and help us learn more and even help us to speak in other languages or can bring their musical gifts. And so how willing are we to look beyond the walls of the church, right, as we see it, and see that God is also at work and calling us to be in relationship with others in a way that is, I pray, mutual, open-hearted, and consensual, and that we're learning with and from them, not putting them on display or using them in a way that is appropriative or to make ourselves feel good about being a diverse church. And I want to say, friends, we have to be very careful and very cautious, and that takes a lot of trial and error. It takes a lot of care and discernment. So I just put that on the table because I think it's important to be somewhat confessional in that way and say it's not a slapdash thing. And I know David well enough to know that David is also a very deliberate, thoughtful, and discerning pastor, and that the gift of working with him in this season is that he takes great care to think about those aspects of relationship as well and to tend them well. So I want to name that it's collaborative.
So what I'm getting from you is that you are working with David and with this other staff as part of worship.
Yeah.
Is there sort of a plan as to how your year goes? Is there because you've been doing this for a while. So how does this go when you work with congregations and then once we have been totally spoiled by all of your talents,
Yeah.
how do you say goodbye?
Yeah.
I mean, so anyway, yeah, so I'd like to hear a little bit more about your
I've
experiences.
been making a career of saying hello. I say this transitions, good transitions are about good hellos and good goodbyes. And so, yes, there is this is, maybe we're still in the handshake, get to know you, get to know your names. But there'll be a moment where probably once a new musician has been named, where I will say, this has been a glorious journey and we will celebrate it and we will have a good goodbye. But I will say, you know, Carol, for me, it's very interesting. I can't say that every one of these opportunities to serve in this way has been the same.
Yeah, well, I would imagine not.
And some
Yeah.
congregations, by the time a new musician is called, are ready to lean into a new person's leadership. And again, I pray my role here is to evoke, to invite, to encourage and inspire, and also do that in a way that then allows you to say, thank you, and this was a good experience for us, and one that we didn't know we needed it. But that's something about this time maybe reorients and gives the community a way to, if I've done my job well as a good interim, I hopefully have tended some soil, tilled it, and put even a few seeds there, but the harvest is not mine. It's not mine to see what the future holds, but it is yours. And so there's a moment of release and of letting go that ultimately this work is God's work. But I hope to be here as an agent of, again, of encouragement, support, and of awareness during a time when your research committee and your congregation are asking some really important questions about who you are. 70 years is not an insubstantial amount of time. What will the next 10 or 15 or 20 years look like? And how does music play into that? But as far as a scheme or a way that we're thinking about the year, I think we're going to just keep planning worship. I'm excited to share some things with you over the next months. Next Sunday, we'll have a beautiful piece of special music in worship. We'll keep up the rhythms and the routines and some of the traditions, I believe, that are really vital to this community. And we'll find some openings for new.
I'd just like to say how much this conversation is resonant with the chapter 6 of Alter in the World that small groups are doing this fall.
Oh,
This
yes.
chapter
Yes.
6 is about embracing community and
Right.
finding community where, because a congregation can be homogeneous. And how does it reach out beyond its homogeneity to what might be a little different? So I think I just was struck as I was reading the chapter last night.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, we're talking about that tonight. Yeah.
So just how much it's echoing with, yeah, if you see new people as part of your community, you're broadening. And if you see new music as part of your worship practice, you're embracing a wider way of worship.
And it's interesting, there is this is a gift of my mentor, Donald Schell, a wonderful Episcopal priest in the Bay Area. He talks about taking time as a congregation, the practice of noticing, which I invited you into. The ruts can go deep in congregational life. We get very habituated. That is not bad, friends. That is a human thing, is it not? But what changes when we stop in the middle of our activity to pay attention? This is mindfulness. This is, again, a contemplative practice to pay attention to where we are, to who we are with, to what color the sky is today, to the people and the places that we're in, to the acoustics of the building and the way the building speaks to us. I will say my mentor, Donald, is constantly, oh, wow, I'm noticing the way the light is striking your face and it's really beautiful. Like he is in the middle of life, stopping to pay attention to what he's experiencing and inviting others to do that with him. I think that one of the, if not an antidote, but one of the correctives to our sense of doing the same thing the same way is these moments of stopping or changing our patterns. And this interim can be part of that, I hope, for us, for you. There'll be moments where I think you will, I hope, feel as if nothing has changed. And then there may be some days or some experiences that you have are like, wow, that was very different. I think there's a balance between the two. And I just would invite you as a congregation, I want to turn some questions out to you, and I know there's some more feedback online, but what are you noticing in the weeks and the months ahead? And I would be really grateful. I'm taking choir members out for one-to-one conversations to learn about them and what they value. But I also want to engage you all and others in the community around those conversations. What are you noticing?
Well, I will say that Gloria wanted us to know that, as she has noted, that music has the power to evoke emotions, inspire reflection, and integrate with other elements of the service. And the choir leader chooses music that complements the preacher's theme,
Yes.
and that she loved the integration of the musical instruments, the drums, the bells, all during the World Communion service. So this is another affirmation of what we've been saying. And let's see. So Bradley Hills Presbyterian Church raised her hand. I don't know how that happened.
Exciting.
Because that's me.
That's you.
That's me. So I don't know. Okay.
Good.
If I'm leaving someone out, let me know. Anyway, anybody here might want to continue.
Questions?
In the context of inviting people and diversity of how we worship, how do you see music ministry, being a music pastor, the role in the context of the role of bringing in younger people into a mainline denominational congregation where that's not the sort of a demographic movement, right? Where we're aging and there's a gap behind us. And how do you see music being able to be attractive to younger people who might go to a Taylor Swift concert and never want to go home? And then, you know, dealing with people who, you know, are appreciate the traditions at the same time.
It's a great question. I'll say this, first of all, I think it's really important that congregations be authentic to who they are. And the more we try to bend ourselves to be what others want us to be in a way that I think creates a sense of false identity, can be really, that can get us onto some thin ice. So be clear, what do we value here? But then also thinking about what draws or engages young people and old people, I would say, I gather, is participation, a sense that my voice matters, that I'm valued here, a sense of I think, and of energy. I find that in my experience of working in and with younger people in general, they're not looking for you to necessarily turn it into a contemporary praise and worship experience, or that it doesn't so much even have to do with style as it has to do with approach to leadership. It has so much to do with the invitation that they are extended to participate. I will say there is a flexibility that I think is needed in working in spaces where we got to be willing to try some new things, to learn some things, to be able to discern whether or not others will want to join us or not. In other words, if you think that the 10:30 service is not necessarily a place where folks who are in their 20s and 30s might be drawn, well, then what changes would need to be made to encourage and support their participation? What would that look like? And live into that with some more, let's say, some more playfulness and some more freedom for a season. I don't know. I think this is a really difficult challenge. I'm going to share just a little bit of my own personal experience. When I first came to the church that I served in New York City, Park Avenue Christian Church on the Upper East Side of Manhattan, very, very unique congregation. You know, the Upper East Side of Manhattan. It's a very moneyed and very sort of, some might say stuffy part of New York. But this was a little outpost of a UCC church, Disciples of Christ Church, that was welcoming to all, that had a multiracial congregation, not of the same socioeconomic brackets as the neighborhood, though there were members of the neighborhood who were members. And within 2 years of working there as the director of music with a concerted effort on our staff, we went from having about 60 people in worship on Sunday mornings to almost 150. And the growth of that community, this was in the early 2010s, 2011, 2013, was in couples, specifically mixed race couples that were looking for a place that were a multicultural context was what they were seeking. And musically, we had in this particular congregation, a choir akin to your chancel choir, a gospel choir, which was a multi-voice and multi-race gospel choir, a youth and children's choir, and then other opportunities that were a little more, say occasional. But it was, I think the fact that all of those choirs were treated as equals and were all involved deeply in leadership and worship, and that there was a sense of sharing and reciprocity in the whole music ministry. We didn't create a contemporary service and a traditional service, if you will. We attempted to create an and also service. We sing classical music and we also sing gospel. We sing gospel and we also sing world music. We sing world music and we also sing classic hymnody. That it was an additive and how to say this, an inclusive sense. Now, was that easy? No. But for folks who were there for an experience of church that honored a breadth of experience, and these were, pretty urbane New Yorkers. Is that the right word? Urbane. People are pretty sophisticated and pretty, in some ways, pretty, their BS filters were pretty high. They're not looking for you to tell them that Jesus loves them and give them a nice pat on the head. But I just have to say, what we sought to do was to create a worship space and create a worship life and energy that could and would welcome people as they were. And if it was the right place for them, it was the right place. If it wasn't, it wasn't, and they didn't come back. I think you can only, the thought of filling the pews back again with young people, or the idea that we can restore some glory days of a church, and I'm not hearing you say that, by the way, Kirk, but I'm hearing you ask a very important question of how do we engage younger people? I think you definitely musically need to offer variety and richness culturally and musically, and that needs to be modeled consistently, not just episodically. And I think you really do need to have multiple opportunities for people to engage around their schedules and life stage. So if you're mostly a congregation of retirees, you have people who are available at certain times of the day and can have rehearsals on Thursday nights. If you're a working human and have children, Thursday night is not necessarily the easiest time to have choir rehearsal, even if it's historically been a time that churches have choirs. Well, what happens when a choir changes to a Saturday rehearsal or a intergenerational weeknight where children and youth and adults all have something offered? Or, what I'm saying is you have to play with models to actually experiment and explore with what would work in your context. I don't think there's like a one-hit wonder here. Not one thing will do it, but it's a process of trial and error and experimentation. That was a long answer, but I hope that's helpful.
Well, we don't have a lot of time left, so what would you like to know more about?
Maybe one last question, or is there anything else that's bubbled up? Maybe I always kind of like to end a time of learning like this with, what are you taking away from this space? What is ringing or resonating with you? Using the bell metaphor. Is there something that someone has said or something that we've heard that will go with us into this season of interim?
Your enthusiasm.
Thank you.
Amen.
And the fact that you have the talent to be able and to provide us with a range of perspectives and ways to express ourselves, and that you probably expect us to come along with you.
I will lovingly invite you.
Yeah.
And I want to say, friends, not every musician carries the same gifts that I do. And as you do look for a new musician, I want to caution you as well to say, not everyone will check every box that you have. But I do think that there are some key things that congregations are really yearning for. And that your work and the search committee's work is to deepen into those key things. What do you value most? What sustains you and what will sustain you for the future? That those are important questions. And I hope, if anything, the energy that I bring helps shake some of the bushes and shake some things out of the bushes so things can be heard and named and experienced.
Well, we can't thank you enough, and we
Thank you.
definitely want to stay in touch with you and, encourage communication because
Yes.
you say, you're open and then we'll also probably, we could get the names of the people on the search committee.
Yes.
And that might be helpful as well, and I'll try to bring that in the next time. As we look forward to the Church of Bradley Hills in the future, we're very enthusiastic that next week, we really want you to be here because we'll be hearing from a group of youth who will be expressing what they see and they want to see and they're really committed to as the church of the future in our community. So please, tune in, come in. We really want to hear from you at that point in time. And I also wanted to draw your attention to quite a couple of opportunities. The ICPC, the Intercongregational Committee, is sponsoring a book discussion on October 28th. And that's on the undocumented Americans. The announcement is in the bulletin and online, but it will be on October 28th from 7 to 8:30. And this is a real opportunity for us to talk about such an these issues that we're facing and to come together and bring that discussion together. And October 22nd, Rabbi Eric is speaking on a Judaism 101 type conversation that will be, and I'm not sure about the time for that, but he will be speaking on October 22nd. So look for that announcement. And please participate today. We have a number of opportunities in our worship service, the Gen Out Chorus. And you want to say a little bit more about James O'Donnell's?
James O'Donnell was the organist at Westminster Abbey for 23 years and has 40 years of experience as a church musician in England, in the Catholic and in Anglican churches. I've had the chance to be with him for the last 2 days, and he is an incredible human being, in addition to being a crackerjack organist. And I've heard colors coming out of the organ that I'm delighted by. And so this afternoon at 5 o'clock, he'll be performing a concert that I think will help the organ here to shine. And if you are able to welcome him and attend, it would be very, very, very appreciated. And thank you, friends. Come sing and participate also as you feel led and able in our music ministry. There are many opportunities, and I really invite you to, if you're curious to learn more, come and sing.
Okay, we are so blessed to have you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, Carol. Thanks for the
Yeah.
hospitality. Thank you all online too.
Yes.
Thanks for hanging in with
This
us.
Vanderberg just said,
Yes.
thanks.
Oh, I love that emojis coming up. All right.
This
This is a savvy Zoom crew. I love it. They're in it. I love it.
Okay, yeah.